When things happen to you, you kind of just keep going. When somebody asks you to stop and go into it, you realize like, wow, you know, it has been a ride. It's been a tough ride.
When I first heard about Cape Town foodie young Zhao, I figured she'd have an interesting story to tell. Born in China and coming to South Africa alone as a 12-year-old isn't for the faint-hearted. But the depth of her story and her willingness to share it is an invitation into something special. A journey into identity, life's challenges, and the true meaning of home.
Dim sum means to touch the heart. Like dim in Cantonese is touch and sum is heart. So food is always the binding agent in families, not just in Chinese culture. Around family feasts, a bunch of aunties and grandma would sit together in the kitchen and then we'll just churn out like hundreds. As kids, we all know how to make them. My name is Zhao Yang. The particular character Zhao in Chinese means wave and welcoming. And the word yang, the same yang as yin and yang, the male energy, the brightness, the sun. So together, it's actually welcoming the sun. I was born in 1984 in China, Guangzhou. I was born an only child, like all of my friends, all of my cousins. We were right in the middle of the one-child policy that started in the late 70s in China. I wasn't very good at sharing, very competitive, probably also a part of the competitive nature of modern Chinese society. When I was 5, I went to live with my paternal grandmother. My parents also came and lived as well. I think my grandmother was more like my mother, and my parents were always working. So grandma was a guerrilla fighter. Like I guess like my nursery rhymes, they were like songs that they used to march to. She's basically my hero. That's her story. Piano was a big extramural activity that everyone did. I started to learn how to play piano at age 3. I would be allocated practice time by my mother once a day for an hour and a half.
Jeez, it's hard now.
Sometimes you don't feel so bad because we live in a block of apartments and then you just hear like piano playing everywhere, like. And then sometimes you will hear kids screaming like in mid-song. Someone's crying, getting disciplined by the parents. It's not about you becoming a pianist, it's about having a discipline. And I think it comes from the fact that mom probably didn't have an opportunity and she always wanted to play piano. Mom also believed that dancing and playing piano was how to groom a gracious woman. So in primary school, there was a thing called the Little Red Pioneer. You go to school wearing this scarf, so then the community can see that you are a red pioneer. That means you are good at school, and you're supposed to hold your head high and be proud of yourself. And I was a red pioneer, and then more. I was a very ambitious little girl. I was voted to be the most outstanding red pioneer. So you have to have like 100% for everything that you do, every subject, which my mom basically like beat me into. The problem is that there are so many kids that did exactly the same thing. Like there's no such thing as fail. Like getting 80% is really bad.
Why did your parents send you to South Africa?
Like I was saying, everyone was getting 100% at school. It was very competitive. And a lot of my peers were sent away. And I enrolled in a school in Cape Town called St. Cyprian's.
As a boarder?
As a full boarder.
How did you feel about coming to South Africa?
I was very excited. I was so curious what was happening out there.
I was supposed to be her mentor, and I had this name, and they'd spelt it wrong, and I just couldn't place this person, and I tried to make contact, and it never worked, and then in came Yang.
I don't know if you understand the context in China, like it's almost impossible to leave the country. It's very hard to get visas and stuff, so I felt very lucky.
I remember Yang when she first arrived at the school. I was her history and English teacher at the time, and this kid arrived from China with hardly any English at all. She was quite extraordinary. must have been a complete shock to her system. The cultures, the ideas, the music, I always think about it as the flavor of the place must have been so different from home.
Yeah, it was definitely a culture shock. Even going to dinner, I didn't know how to use a knife and fork. I held a knife on my left hand and the fork on the right hand, and I tried to figure out how to eat. At home, I only see Chinese kids, you know, and then here there's all kinds of children from different parts of South Africa and have different ways of speaking and different ways of relating. And for me, it was kind of like shock, and then was like, okay, where do I begin? So I started to keep a journal. Boarding school was really lonely at the beginning. I didn't have many friends, or I didn't have any friends.
Landing here and all of that aside, even just getting to know a group of girls in a very difficult time in your life. We'd obviously grown up in a really privileged space. We were a little bit mean sometimes. For instance, she would chew with her mouth open as a way of appreciating food. And people were a bit mean about it and, you know, trying to like teach her that this is not the way we do it here.
The age of 12 is a critically important time, especially in a young girl's life, because this is a time where you're working out who you are, yet at the same time, you desperately need the support of your family because you're going to be hitting your head.
I started to write letters, like pages-long letters to my parents, but addressing it to them individually, like Dad, a specific set of problems. With Mom was a lot of that. Kids at cars would say certain things and like, I don't know how to perceive them, you know what I mean? And then Mom would say, it's because this, like, you must be more understanding, or you should be kind of authentic with people so that people can get to know you. The loneliness came when the weekend would come. Everybody clears out, everyone's very excited on a Friday afternoon to go home. Now I realize, like, I was really far away from home.
She missed her friends, of course. She didn't like the food, definitely not. She was the epitome of innocence. You know, like cattiness and mean girl stuff, you could just tell that that wasn't like on her radar, you know, that she had been focused and had her head down up until now, and that somehow this was her reward, like to come here because she was the best.
I remember I made a decision that in order to not feel so lonely, I need to make friends. In order to make friends, I need to speak English. And it was that simple.
You were so young when you made that switch. You got it. How did things change?
I learned basic English and I could communicate with everyone. After the second term, it took me about 7 months. Yeah, I mean, you can ask my teachers. They were actually also very shocked because then suddenly I was talking so much. They used to call me Radio Young. And then I started to make friends. We've carried each other through a lot of hard times growing up. There's a sense of unconditional love there that they're almost like my family.
The way she managed so quickly to settle in, to become South African, actually, more than anything else. She managed to absorb the language with remarkable speed. She managed to absorb the people and the atmosphere around her, and she really stood out in that sense.
School was a breeze. It was so much fun. I go to a park to look at like rocks and understand geography that way, and then I never had that experience before. But also I don't remember anything I learned because there was just so much playing and so much fun. Chinese comprehension studies, all we read about is the childhood stories of Lenin and Marx and Hegel. Everything is just basically like, if you don't understand, just memorize, and then later it will come to you. I learned the discipline from school in China, but here I learned that there's a lot more than school results to life. And the plan was that we was all supposed to come back to help build the country with whatever skill they've acquired in a different country, and then become the experts in their fields.
Young had leapt into a new country. She'd mastered its language and found her feet. But as high school came to an end, it was time to think about returning to China. Then suddenly, everything she knew as home disintegrated.
Cape Town is so moody. But because I guess she knows she's beautiful, so she can be moody. See, that's where my school is. I can see it. My hometown city is nothing like this. We're so lucky to actually have been born and bred in a beautiful city like this.
What's home for me?
Yeah.
What's home for you?
Young's parents sent her to boarding school in South Africa when she was just 12. They believed that learning English would give her a competitive edge over her peers when she returned home after high school to a newly globalized China.
In 2000, my parents separated. They tried to keep it from me because I was about to go into matric and then they didn't want to add more stress to my life, but I insisted on going home to visit, and then that's when I found out, you know, the parents weren't living in the same house and stuff.
What was that like for you?
Just angry, I guess like every child who went through a divorce. So Dad asked me if I wanted to live with him in his house. I was tired and jet-lagged and dragged straight to lunch to have this serious talk, and I just looked at him and I said, I came home to come home, and I'm going home. And he was like, where's home? And I was like, where grandmother is. Like, I remember walking in, the house was really dark, and I think Grandma was also feeling the loneliness and realized that home is no longer the same as the home that I knew growing up, that happy childhood.
Your parents had very clear reasons for sending you away. They wanted what they believed was the best for you, but it must have been really hard for them to let you go.
I know it was hard for them. It was just like, look, there's a bigger picture here that we're trying to achieve, so let's kind of stay strong and, you know, toughen up. 喂，爸爸。你好。
主要是有一个教育比较好的环境的学校就行了，因为你爸爸相信，人的智慧不是教出来的，是熏出来的。南非比较独特，那里有一个比较伟大的人物叫做，没想到你爱上了南非。你还没出生呢，我已经把所有的这个连环画的名著、古代名著都给你搬了，就无论去哪里都不应该丢掉中国画的那个根本，这是一个。
I remember grandfather liked to practice calligraphy. It was his way of meditating, and he would teach me. What I learned from there, if I were to look back, it's that it's about assertiveness. So like the end, when you end a word, like it always says a lot about you, like how you kind of leave the word. When you're a child and you are the only child and then everyone is looking at you like you're the one chance, you know what I mean? And they were like spoiling you to bits. You don't feel that you are taking on their dreams. Do you know what I mean? Later, when hardship happens, that's when you start to think about like, is this what I want? Why did I want that? And then you start talking to your parents, and then you realize, oh, it was actually your idea more than mine. Now, where is my idea?
出生在一个全新的时代吧，刚刚接受了文革，然后开始经济改革，那会儿你出生，所以我们一起面对一个对于我们来说完全陌生的一个。
In the mid-60s, Mao's famous Cultural Revolution began. It was his way of wiping out all traces of free enterprise and independent thinking. A gargantuan effort to reprogram the country into the communist way.
I hear more about the Cultural Revolution from my dad than my mom. I guess she kind of just went with it, like I guess some people did. And my father felt it was very unfair for him.
What happened?
They were sent to the countryside during the late teens to become farmers in the same province, but two different farms. The leader decided that everybody should be able to know how to operate on the land. My dad told me that he had a dream of becoming a diplomat, and he wanted to go and study French and be a French ambassador, fancy, like. And that was taken away from him.
What was it like for Dad? What did he tell you?
He just felt like the world was moving in a certain direction and the country was moving in a different direction, and he didn't really appreciate that. But I think at his old age, he kind of, through his writing and his poetry, I can see that he actually appreciated what he got out of it. And Dad and Mom, different years respectively, were sent back to the city, back to their homes, and then they were allocated professions.
What do you mean?
They basically they were told, like, okay, you're going to school for dentistry, and you're going to school for medicine, you're going to school for law, you're going to do this.
They were just assigned a profession.
Yeah. So Dad became a doctor, Mom became a dentist, and then they met at the same hospital when they were interning.
我们当医生的时候还是文化大革命的状态，那么医生的工资是非常低的。面对一个全新的一个经济改革开放的时代，这90块钱对于一个家庭来说，那是次品之中的次品啊。所以，我决定这个投身到这个经济改革当中，就下海。现在看来，这一切都很正常，但是30多年前，这是一件非常艰难才能做出的决定。
I remember Grandma was the main cook in the house, and the first time I went into the kitchen, Grandma was making a soup, and then I'm supposed to pack my piano books and haven't practiced already. And Mom, she even specifically called, she said to me, get your stuff ready, practice, and I'll be there. And then on my way from the telephone to my room, I just spotted Grandma making a soup, and then I went inside, and then I was like, what are you doing? She's like, do you want to help me? And then I kind of lost track of time, and I ended up making a soup with Grandma, and then Mom came in, and I haven't packed the book, and I haven't practiced piano, and she shouted at me, and she said, this is what you want to do, in the kitchen, making food, you know? So the world is out there, you want to be here, making food. And then Grandma was like, hey, there's nothing wrong with feeding yourself. So there was like a conversation, almost arguments between Grandma and Mom happened right in front of my eyes. So I think the way I understand is that Mom came from a time where women want to get out of the house. And Grandma comes from a time where I do whatever I want. Like, do you know what I mean? There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to do what I need to do or what I want to do. If I have to pick up a gun, I will. If I have to look after my grandchildren, I will. And then I just keep sneaking back into the kitchen with Granny. Much later on, it was much stronger for me that the path that my parents carved out for me has something to do with them not having certain dreams realized.
But schooling Young overseas was an expensive exercise, and eventually it took its toll.
We were having financial problems, and then Mom basically took on the responsibility of taking care of me. So she left China. Sorry. And
Where did she go?
she went to work in Angola.
Young's mother was a divorced woman on her own, and like her daughter had to learn a new language in a foreign place. But she built up 5 businesses in post-war Angola, determined to pay for her daughter's school and university education and provide her with a future.
Just thinking of how much she sacrificed for me. So alongside her heartbreak from divorce, I didn't think she had time to process what was happening with her. She just kind of like, I'm a mother and I have to do this. I'm not going to think about myself, you know?
At great personal cost, young Zhao's parents sent their only child to boarding school and then to university in South Africa. Now she faced the question of where was home, and if she chose South Africa over China, how would it be possible for her to stay?
I study Psocai in politics and sociology because of limited options due to my immigration status. Towards the end, I started to panic. Like, what do I do with philosophy and politics? My friends started to move to Johannesburg, and I thought maybe I should go and check it out. Talk to people in rocky streets and sit on the side of the road eating chicken wings. They kind of were very open about their stories. They always start the story with, in South Africa, we are like this, we think like this, and this is us. And it was very nice, it was a nice time. And I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. And I came back and then I just drew up my CV and started looking for a job.
The rest of us were kind of applying for jobs and getting them and having our first work trips. Whereas for her, it was her student visa was now finished, and so what next?
So then I started finding like odd jobs here and there, and then I started to panic again.
Young felt a huge need to honour what her parents had done to give her a head start in life. But her status as a foreigner was a disadvantage, and South Africa's high unemployment rate and xenophobia made the position of immigrants a difficult one. Somehow, like her grandparents and parents before her, she just had to make it work.
I love the story of your grandmother and this idea that she could have been anything. You know, she said she could be a revolutionary, or she could be a cook, or...
Yeah, like she made things work.
What did she teach you?
Just resilience. She's really, really strong. She was shot at 6 times, and she always used to tell me, like, nothing is gonna happen to you, nothing. My grandma could make hand grenades and things like that. Like, she can cook that up, like, quickly, you know?
She can cook up a hand grenade?
She can. Like, she later cooked up some dim sums to show me. Yeah. She's the 14th daughter, the last born of her family. And China went through loads of famine and change and stuff, and she's lost all of her family members. Some were sold, some were married off. So my grandma was 16. She was about to be married off, and she heard the army coming past her town.
It was the Red March.
It was the 1930s, and the Communist Red Army was marching in retreat from the Chinese nationalists. The Long March became an iconic symbol of the opposing forces in China's civil war, who came together later to fight the invading Japanese. Young's grandmother, having joined the communists, was in the thick of it.
And she ran out, and then she went to see what was going on. This is her story, she told me. And that she then signed up and ran away from home, and she never saw her parents again.
In the beginning, there are 180,000 marchers in the communist caravan. Casualties are enormous. 3/4 of the marchers die en route. But the survivors press on, and when they reach their mountain sanctuary, Mao himself is on hand to salute and welcome them.
When the communists came into power, there were a lot of people who didn't agree with it, and they decided to go towards this. They either would flee to America looking for a better life, or if they couldn't make it there, they would go to this other Golden Mountain. That's literally what Johannesburg was called, Gamsan, which is the mountain of gold.
Both of my grandparents on both sides came from Eastern Europe. Opportunities were here. The gold, and this was the new world. So it's also a story of migration and moving and food.
Many Chinese, as they came through, that have friends and relatives from their village, etc., who had set roots in South Africa so they could work with them in their restaurants, in their small businesses. Most of them had spaza shops, etc., in the townships.
I guess entrepreneurship for some people is just what they have to do. Like the guy in the corner shop from Somalia. He could be an electrical engineer in his country, but here he can only be a spaza shop owner. And that's what he has to do.
When my father passed away, I went down the road from my parents' shop, and the only shop open was run by a Pakistani family, a young family, and cradled in the father's arm with this baby. And I could tell they were immigrants from Pakistan. And when I looked at that baby, I said, when he grows up, when he's my age, he's going to be a full-on South African, speaking with a South African accent. And seeing this family run the shop until 9, 10 o'clock at night, it finally hit home about the sacrifices that our parents did, coming to a foreign country without much support, and just so that we could have a much better life than what they were able to have back in their home country.
In South Africa, still not formally employed, Young pressed ahead. She'd started cooking for friends and word spread about her homemade delicacies, inspired by her grandmother's kitchen.
Every time my mom sees my pictures on magazines like cooking, she's always like, "You're quite good at pretending to be a chef, huh?"
When you're in your restaurant and you're crafting the dim sum, you're carrying on not just your ancestry, but your culture. You're carrying on the smells and the sights. And do you ever notice that?
Yes, so just my way of reaching out to the world, I guess. Like, this is me, and this is what I do, and this is what I know. Don't you think it's cool? I was cooking a lot of dim sums because with limited budget for your groceries, you can make a bunch and then you can freeze. I used to just make them in bulk, and then when friends come over, I'll fry a few, and then we'll have some tea and dim sums and catch up.
The idea of dim sum, people only think is like maybe 3 or 4 things, but dim sum is literally about, it's over 60, maybe even up to 100 different items.
I feel like my gesture in the kitchen is very similar to grandma. Like, I sometimes feel like I'm channeling grandma. Like the way she holds the bowl and the way she beats eggs with chopsticks. I was very curious what she considered to taste good. And I started learning about like texture. I started learning about color and smell. It's my favorite herb, coriander. If I was a vegetable, I'll probably marry coriander. And then ginger would be my side piece. Would be my affair. A woman that never went to culinary school, but she was saying the same thing as what a book would say. She trusted a lot of her instinct.
Your grandmother having so many years of experience of different things to cook, and as a kid, looking at the entire range and how every single one of them can hit the mark. I think she was just like, I don't think I could ever do that, but I would love to do it.
What was it like for you in the kitchen watching your granny cook?
She just looked like she was dancing in the kitchen, like back and forth, washing vegetables, beating eggs, boiling water. There was a flow in the kitchen that was mesmerizing for me to watch. And I would just observe like her face when she decides something is ready. The way I understand it is almost like that switching off the heat. It's a way of bringing out that ingredient at its best, but you have to know what is supposed to be its best. You have to understand the ingredient. So the decisive moment where you're taking it off the heat, it's almost like taking a photograph. When a beautiful picture, you kind of watch that time. This is a photo, boom, you click.
In 2012, Young's paternal grandmother, whom she'd grown up with and adored, passed away.
爷爷在你爸爸1岁多的时候就走了，说的走就是死了，留下了6个孩子，由你奶奶一手带大，所以说你奶奶。
Unless she didn't know where to go. I was like, do I go back to China? I've stayed away for so long, I don't even know how it works there. And do I stay here? But what if they don't let me stay? Grandma's gone, like, where do I live? You know, like, and it's kind of, and then that also took me into kind of a down, and then I also just kind of woke up and decided, okay, screw it, today. We're going to make a decision, and that is, we're staying here. What can we do to stay here? I believe that there's such a thing as proactive prosperity. Putting in the work and knowing that putting one foot over another, using your mind, using your wisdom, drawing strength from yourself and your past, you can actually make something that you want happen. Yeah, big things for big girls.
Increasingly confident to share her Chinese delicacies with others, Young accepted a friend's invitation to set up a dim sum store at a local night market.
She needed, food on the table, literally. And she was like, well, dim sum, why not? And I can make these and I can sell them. And So it was literally a situation of, okay, I need a steamer, I need a gas stove, and like hustling around, who can I borrow from?
It was our first Friday night, and Young had arrived in all Young style quite late with her like gas bottle and a frying pan and a few odds and ends and a cooler box full of dim sums.
People who have never tasted it, when they tasted it, they just loved, and then they were ordering another plate, and some of them would stand next to me while I'm cooking, and then just pass the plate to me, like, can I have another portion?
2 hours down the line, there was no more dim sum and everything was sold out.
Once you start doing something that triggers the kind of person you were as a kid, it's not really work at the end of the day.
The dim sums were always sold out first. And people would make a point of coming on a Friday night to have dim sum. The menu also grew as Young's confidence grew, drew a lot of people. Yeah, it was fantastic.
I even dared to think about opening a restaurant. Never thought like that opening a restaurant would be a possibility or even something I would do. My mom then at the same time emailed me and told me that she had to come to South Africa for a checkup because she was experiencing health problems. I haven't seen my mom at that time for 5 years. Yeah, she was working very hard. So mom came down and mom had a checkup and she was diagnosed with cancer. And she had decided to take up treatment in Cape Town. So she decided instead of going back to China, she was going to stay with me and then get better here.
Young Zhao had come a long way since arriving in South Africa as a lone 12-year-old. She was now a fully fledged foodie. Her dim sum trade at local markets had grown into a huge success, and she was toying with the idea of opening a restaurant. But then, her mum was diagnosed with cancer.
She came to Cape Town for the checkup, and I happened to have one of the market nights on the same day after her checkup, before we knew the results actually. So she said, oh, let me come and see, you know. And then she saw me carrying this big box and then taking out these pans and pots and you know, connecting gas and getting my hands dirty, and she was very surprised, you know, because, you know, I mean, I was that piano playing, like, puffy dress wearing girl, and then obviously I haven't spent so much time with her, you know. She was getting to know me again.
Young's mom is as baller as Young is, you know. She left China, she was not in a good space. Post-divorce, I'm from northern Namibia, very close to Angola. It's not an easy place, especially for someone also who had to go through similar experiences of not understanding the language or the culture or anything. She made sure that if anything ever happened to her, if she got sick, that everything would be taken care of.
While Young was reconnecting with her mother, her business geared into a whole new level.
The second market we had, I sold out of almost like 400 pieces. And then it just became really popular. And then people started calling me to cater. They asked me if I do catering. And I said, yeah, I do catering. I know how to do it. And that became the pop-up. And then we just did vigorous marketing on social media and took photos, documented everything, rolling out plans, like as we go along. And it happened really fast. At the beginning, I was excited, and then I started to get a bit scared of how big it could grow and how fast I should learn, you know, about the business.
Things were happening, the future was opening up. And you made a decision, you made an understandable sacrifice to put your career to the side.
My mother was diagnosed with cancer, stage 4, and she wasn't given much time. And then we sat down and we discussed what to do. And she decided not to go back to China. She wanted to stay here with me. And she asked if it was okay for me to care for her. And I agreed, and I was like, well, you're my mom. There's only one mom, and you only have me. I'm your only child. So I said yes, of course. And then we got a house, and then we started to live together again after so many years of being apart. It's bittersweet. Then kind of just put Beijing opera aside for a little while because I had to kind of get into the rhythm of looking after mom and then see what I can fit in.
I think we always think we have more time, you know, and we don't necessarily. And I think because her and her mother had lived apart for so many years, and there's also anger about being sent away, and just general, and then also just like clashes, because now you want me to be a certain way, but if you wanted me to be a certain way, you should have kept me by your side.
It was food that brought mom and daughter closer.
It was a very difficult time for her, but it was also a very healing thing for Yang and her mom. When you have cancer, you have a very low appetite. And when you have a low appetite, when you want to eat something, it has to be something that you're very familiar with. She'd have to cook a lot, which is kind of weird as Kismet, because I think there was a lot of reconnection with the old taste that she used to like back when she was a kid. Like they say, like certain things like sense of smell can trigger like a childhood memory. It kind of took her right back to her happy place as a kid. And you can see that also in the way that she makes food, like now.
She loved my cooking. She was surprised that I made food that I knew how to make like her mother's food, you know? She once told me, she's like, you know, you might actually have a talent for this. And maybe it's your grandmother's genes that you inherited, not mine. And then we even laughed about that time with the piano lesson and when she was shouting at me for being in the kitchen and stuff. So eventually she became really proud. And one day I was sitting with mom in chemo and then she said to me, why don't you just go and find a place to rent and start the restaurant? Like, I want to see, you know? And then I said to her, I was like, how can I look after you and open a restaurant? It's just like too much, very exhausting. But she's like, I know, I'm just saying, you know, it would be nice to see. And then I realized like what she meant was she wanted to see me doing something and not feel worried. So then my life changed from taking care of mom every day to taking care of mom in between, looking for premises and stoves and fridges and building, meeting contractors and training staff and things like that. And
It's been very tough.
mom was supportive, so it wasn't as tough. I was very touched, like sometimes I would come home late and there's a bowl of soup for me. You know, I was supposed to be the one who was doing that for her, you know? I think what she saw was that it got to my heart.
How much of a leap of faith is it for anybody to open a restaurant?
Oh, it's a big leap of faith. I'm friends with some chefs and the one lady called me, she said, don't do it. And then I spoke to mom and she said, look, a lot of the stuff that I ended up doing, no one thought I could do. I didn't even think I could do. If I had to do it, like, what are you going to do here?
I think most of us would be like, I need some time, I'm going to take care of my mom. No. She was like, I'm going to take care of my mom, refurbish an apartment, get a restaurant space that doesn't even have a tap inside, and then I'm going to refurbish that, and then that's going to become a restaurant, and I'm going to like appear in 1,000 magazines so that like mom can read them and know that I'm okay.
In March 2014, Beijing Opera opened in Cape Town.
She undersells herself and then wows on the delivery. And it's the same with her restaurant. It's an art exhibition space. It's an amazing first date space. She came here and learned the ways of being and threw away the ones that didn't work for her, brought back things from her upbringing that did work for her, and has made a beautiful mengelmoes of her experience, and she's just young.
I looked after my mom for about 3 years, and then she went back to China for her last few months, and she passed away there in 2014, in July. They say bigger the love, the bigger the loss. So
In China, Yang took part in the traditional Buddhist practice of laying her mother to rest. Incense was lit to guide her spirit and coins dropped to mark the way. But back in South Africa, she struggled to come to terms with her grief.
Sometimes I look at other people that have lost a mom and they seem fine after a week, and then I would wonder if there's something wrong with me, or maybe am I depressed? But then I allowed myself to go into it and kind of embraced, well, fought it and then embraced eventually, and that was the only way I could come out of it. It was to be like, well, it's okay. Like, it's actually beautiful to feel lost. I often wondered, like, I mean, after losing my grandmother and my mom, like 1 year after another, like, I wonder how they felt like when they left the world and whether they were at peace, like what it meant to be at peace. And then I thought about what it would mean for me to be at peace. I think it would be that I've understood what happened along the way, and then I've taken up the challenges as opposed to hiding and not dealing with it. That I actually make sense of what happened to me, and also engaged and be present with when things were good too, you know? Like that I was there every moment. I was actually grateful that she encouraged me to open the restaurant before she passed. At least I had something to do every day. It's been going for almost 3 years now. We've gone through some really great times and then some really seriously worrying times. We serve a variety of dim sums. We've also got steamed dumplings, which is made with a rice pastry. Also baos, which is a kind of like
It's like a puffy
puffy,
bun,
yeah.
isn't it?
Also a range of noodle soups. It's made with my grandmother's chicken broth. I phoned my mom's mom, and she was in the hospital getting a drip. She's really old, like almost 90, but like she kind of gave me the whole recipe for this pork belly that I really want to make for my restaurant. It's like a family recipe, you know?
What I love about it is it's a totally different way of eating.
Yes.
I mean, even your tables, they're
Yes.
big, they're square, people
Yes.
share,
Yes.
you eat little bits.
Yeah.
It's not like the Western way, we get this huge plate of food and
Yeah.
no one shares.
Yeah. There's a lot more to Chinese food than what the Western world know about. For example, fish is yu, means leftovers, like abundance. So you must always have fish on the table, like to wish everyone abundance. It's a 2-year anniversary since my mom's passing. The year when she passed away, all my aunties and uncles came forth and then started teaching me how to do this ritual for the rest of my time. We make lots of food. This rice dish that my mom loved, even when she was sick. Like, she would call me when I'm at work and she'd be like, come home and make me that rice with that sausage. It's a space for meditation. You know, to remember them, to talk to them and update them on what's been happening in the last year. Asking them if they need anything, if they are comfortable, if they're happy where they are. The yin world, because we live in the yang world, and then the people who pass, they live in the yin world. For me, I mean, like my generation, we don't know much about these kind of rituals, and I was very glad to have been introduced to it. It's always a nice time to kind of turn inwards and have conversations with yourself. It's been a great learning experience, but it's also been stressful, and And I had to, again, look inside for the real reason of why I'm doing it. And the purpose now is that I've got 7 ladies working for me, and most of them are single mothers, and they each have at least 2 kids. So I feel like now I have 21 people's livelihood on my back, and that feels kind of meaningful, more meaningful than, you know what I mean? Like thinking, oh, I'm just taking a risk and I'm being brave for myself. I think that's the point of like entrepreneurship. It's about creating employment, and then it's about creating an environment for mutual support, because they support me as much as I hope to support them.
With friends and customers surrounding her, in a space which expresses the love and the tastes of her ancestors, and with her mother's spirit always close by, Young has created a space to call home.
I'm starting to feel settled here. I think home is here in South Africa.
She is an old soul, but she's also a very exciting person. And, you know, sometimes she contracts and takes care of herself, and sometimes she explodes into, you know, action and gets things done, and you never know what's going to come next.
I believe that this is the age to create and be proactive about creating your new possibilities and like change whatever you don't like. Stick to your own story. I think it's just similar to how grandfather taught me how calligraphy works, you know, like how you kind of lift your brush at the end when you decided this word is done. It's almost like the same as grandma's cooking. It's like when you switch off the heat, where you bring out the ingredients best. It's just it's how you end your story, I guess. It's how you end your story.